Hello everyone, today I'd like to talk about hip hop albums, in particular hip hop skits. Now, I've been listening to Ja Rule's Pain is Love album recently, and I totally forgot about this album, and I still consider it his best album of his catalog. Now, it has only, like, to me, maybe a third of it is any good, the rest are okay. But after listening to this album again, I forgot how I hated listening to the album itself. Now, it's not the songs per se. There are like few bangers on this one for sure. Living It Up be my favorite of the bunch, but listening from start to finish, I forgot about these skits. Or to me, in particular on this album, I thought the skits ruined the album itself, mainly because it didn't fit. Now, about skits, if you don't know what skits are, they're exactly what the name says. It's a skit, like an SNL skit. Usually these skits are like short in length, about a minute long ish, hopefully, and they're like a few of them per album, per hip hop album, and usually they're comedic. Whatever the rapper thinks, or the rap group thinks that are funny, or they feel like they want to express in the skit, would be in the skit. And they're like I said, there are about a few of them throughout an album. Usually an intro, there's a couple in between, and maybe an outro or a penultimate outro. And it's been for, I've known since listening to hip hop albums, they've been on every single hip hop album, skits that is, through at least through the 90s. I don't know about the 80s. I do know maybe De La Soul. From what I understand, De La Soul was the first group that really either started it or made it popular in their albums. So it could have happened in the 80s as well. But all the growing up, all the artists, hip hop artists and albums that I've listened to in the 90s at least, always had skits. And I know in the 2000s as well, like Ja Rule and other artists I have, they always have skits. Now, to me, skits, I never understood why they had skits to begin with. And when growing up listening to these albums, I always thought they kind of ruined the album, or they kind of depreciated the album's uniqueness or value. In a sense, it could have been like S tier, could have been great, and with these skits I thought it dropped it down a notch just because of the skits. I may be in the minority, but I think skits are pretty much useless, and I don't know why. First of all, I don't know why it's always on hip hop albums. I don't know. I don't think there's any other albums that have skits, or other music genre albums that have skits. There could be, but I do know it's prevalent in hip hop albums, first of all. Second of all, especially in recent years, let's say 2000s and later, these skits, majority of them are just bad. I mean, they try to be funny, but to me they're not. Sometimes they're just too long, each skit. Otherwise, sometimes there are just too many of them, or sometimes they're being forced into a song, like it's like an intro to a song, and it becomes part of the song, or some combination of what I just said. And because of that, that's why I don't really own a lot of hip hop albums per se. I just, if I can, prefer to just get a unedited being still parental advisory, of greatest hits if I can. And mainly because, well, outside of being a greatest hits guy, a compilation guy, but especially for hip hop, it's one of those things where if you can eliminate the skits, I would go for that. And again, I may be a minority in it. Going back to Ja's album here, again, I thought skits ruined this album. I just couldn't take it. I had to basically skip to the songs I wanted to listen to, and I just could not play this album front to back. So now I'm trying to figure out why skits, even to this day, is still prevalent in hip hop albums, and I'm still trying to make sense out why. Now the most recent albums, let's say from 2000s to 2010s, that I thought had decent skits was Kendrick Lamar's his debut album, Good Kid, Mad City. I thought those skits were pretty good. And then my favorite would be from Kanye, his debut album, College Dropout, and to a certain extent his sophomore album, Late Registration. I thought those skits were great in the sense that there was a theme to it, and it wasn't overacted, it wasn't too long, and they kind of fit the album itself. Like, if you listen to the album front to back and with the skits in there, they're kind of augmented in properly that you don't feel it's off a bit. With like Ja's album, and I could say for me personally, like 90% of hip hop albums that I've listened to, these skits feel out of place. They feel out of place, forced, and just doesn't really fit in with the album itself. It just seems so out of place. Now, going back to listen to some of the 90s hip hop albums, there's some bad ones too. I'm not a big fan of Wu-Tang skits. I think there's one with just all phone calls or something. It just didn't make any sense. I didn't like it per se, but there's some good ones in the 90s for sure. And I think even if they weren't good or I wasn't feeling it, I didn't feel they were out of place. And I think the major reason why skits work originally for hip hop albums, especially when they first started out, again, maybe late 80s through the 90s, was that hip hop artists back then, they were pretty much, majority were their own, they wrote their own stuff, they produced their own stuff. Think of NWA, Dre and all that. All those artists, or I wouldn't say all, but a lot of them back in the 90s, they did their own stuff. And when they write their own stuff, they rap on their own music. There's usually a message, right, that they're trying to convey. And when they do that, they kind of do that for a lot of their songs, or try to relate all their songs onto an album. And that album is a concept, right? There's a theme to it. And the skits that they make kind of go along with that album and that theme as a whole. And that's why I think it works back then, as well as the skits themselves. There's like, usually there's a message, and I think besides being trying to convey a message, I think the reason why skits were introduced was to kind of not just augment the message of the album itself, but it kind of deviates from a lot of the songs that are on the album. In a sense, usually in hip hop albums, especially in the 90s, the songs were pretty deep and they had a strong message, and they try to, it's serious, and they try to convey that. Having a skit like kind of in between some of these songs on the album, kind of, it's like a break, almost like an intermission, right? It's gives you okay, you're listening to a set of songs that's really deep, it's really serious, and then okay, let's take a break from it. Here's a skit. And again, skits are usually comedic. They're supposed to be funny, and it kind of takes away from, or gives you a break, a pause from the album itself. And then once the skit is done, then we continue on with the hardcore deep messages from these hip hop music songs. So that's, I think that's why skits were put in there in the first place, and that's a lot of hip hop artists, pretty much everyone, used skits in their albums. And I think the majority back in the 90s especially worked, or at least didn't kind of seem out of place. Now, I'd say from the 2000s on, especially like early yeah, I'd say mid 2000s on, I think these skits just don't work anymore. Mainly because, remember I mentioned like back in the 90s, they hip hop artists, they kind of either they have one producer, they produce it themselves, or they have one main producer to produce the whole thing, and they would create their own messages and so forth, and rap over their own tracks. These days, that's not the case, right? You're going to have multiple producers, heck, even songwriters. Each hip hop song, there might be like, you know, half a dozen or so writers on the track, and you know, and for each track there's going to be a different producer. You might have an album that has 4 or 5 different songwriters and producers or something like that, and you would just rap on a track and combine it and then create the album. And that's where I think why skits are even worse in the later years for hip hop albums, because albums, again, from let's say mid 2000s on, I would throw in the early 2000s. So 2000s on, you would have kind of songs that are created by different people, produced by different people, and it's just really, albums these days are just a collection of different songs from different producers, different writers, and all that, and they don't really mesh, you know, together just from the song perspective, right? And then not only that, because they don't mesh well, there's no like clear or theme or message to it. And then you add these skits, which don't really glue anything together, or you know, they're just there because hip hop albums have them. You got to do them, and that's what it seems like to me. It's just forced in the worst possible way. Just, you know, because if hip hop albums need to have them, you got to have them. You're forcing them in there, along with the theme of the album itself is really disjointed. There's no real theme anymore. It's just a bunch of random, different people produced and written tracks, and just kind of put it all together on an album. And that's why I really think that skits are kind of useless these days. Now, again, like Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City, I thought that was pretty good, and the reason why is it's a coherent album. You know, Kendrick Lamar, he knows what he's doing across the board. They're not truly random or anything like that, and there's a message to be, a theme that he sets for his albums. And Kanye, especially his early years, same thing. His trilogy is just fantastic. So, but outside of those artists, a lot of them are just random stuff that I think just degrades the album entirely, with these random skits that are either too long, you know, don't fit in with the album, become part of a song that just ruins the song, and a combination of those three. So that's why I wish with skits, I wish hip hop albums don't, new artists or current artists that are making new hip hop albums, don't rely on skits, especially if there's no theme to the album per se. It's just a bunch of, you know, random tracks from different people producing, and different writer composers. Just don't do it. If you feel like you need to have a skit or some type of interlude or intermission in the album, just freestyle or something, you know, or have an instrumental or something like that, you know, like a break in there, and don't force it. That's the thing. So anyway, I just trying to explain why I feel, you know, why I don't really like hip hop albums in general. And it's not necessarily the songs per se or anything, it's the skits that to me just ruined the album from a listening experience. And I wish they would just, if they can't think of it, just stop and don't do it. I mean, it's just not worth it. But it's still prevalent these days, so I have a feeling most people who buy albums or listen to albums like the skits. So I don't know. Again, I think I'm in the minority on that, but let me know what you think. All right, thanks. Bye.